Oh, there's a camera. I'm not going to move then. I'm going to stay here. It's okay if I move? Greet the people. So good evening. Good evening. My name is John Jackson. I'm Dean of the School of Social Policy and Practice here at the University of Pennsylvania. I am so delighted, genuinely delighted, that this evening has come. So I've been Dean now of the School of Social Policy and Practice. This is my 4th year. And even before I started, before I got here, before I knew about this lecture series, which is now over a decade old, started in 2004 in the spring. But before I knew about any of this stuff, I had heard the name Lewis Carter. Folks had stories. They wanted to sit me down and tell me about Lewis Carter. And there are only 3 or 4 names in the history of the School of Social Policy and Practice, which was the School of Social Work, that I hear over and over and over again. And always framed as someone who made a difference in my life, someone who got me to think a little bit differently about what I take for granted. And Lewis Carter was one of these people, one of the 3 or 4 folks I hear about almost literally every month. Someone tells me about Lewis Carter. So I feel like, in some ways, part of what I want to imagine I'm doing here as dean is just continue a legacy that he was constitutive of helping to build. He had a central role to play in making it sustainable, and his legacy lives on not just in this series, which is so incredibly important, but in the walls and halls of our buildings. You should know that. People speak his name all the time. So I'm very happy you're here. This series is just one of our attempts to make sure people remember the significance of that name and what it means for a school like ours. And I'm delighted, absolutely delighted, that our guest speaker today, whose bio you have in your handout, is also, one thing you won't see in there, although I'm going to make sure I tell him to change that bio, he's also a graduate of the School of Social Work at the University of Pennsylvania, school class of 1995. And I remember the first time we got a chance to meet, which was probably a couple years ago. And one thing you will find out pretty soon is he holds no punches, and he's a straight shooter. And he believes what he's saying. He has one goal. His one goal is to teach as many poor, black and brown kids, poor kids, period, as he can, and to give them the resources they need to be successful. That's all he wants to do. He oozes that. And I remember the first time I went to meet him, I went to his school in Connecticut when he was at that school, and he was telling me about his time here and all of the stuff he learned when he was I think it was still in Castor, but it was constructed a little bit differently. And I remember 2 things from that discussion. The first one was that he had not been back to the school, had not been back to the School of what now is Social Policy and Practice since he graduated. And part of it was because he wasn't sure we were still invested in social work, right? We had changed the name. There seemed to be this lack of reverence and respect for the value of the profession. So he was like, if they don't respect what I do, why would I come back and invest in them? So I wanted to make sure he knew that we're still producing the best social workers we can. They're doing great work, and that the stuff he's doing is really important in that legacy. The second thing, though, I remember from that conversation is he told me, even though he's a full-time educator, he has EDD, I mean, he is someone who's doing a ton of work and has a lot of different credentials to back it up. The one thing he told me that I've held on to, and I've repeated to other people, is that the degree he uses almost every day is his MSW. That it's something he can mobilize to get his work done. And I always remember to tell my social work students that you don't know what form your professional life will take, but the degree will be valuable. So we're just so glad you're here. I'm looking forward to hearing you. What I like about this lecture series, what I like about Dr. Perry, our guest speaker today, is, this is a place where we want to examine ideas in their fullest, right? We don't want to just be ideologically narrow-minded. We want to make sure we have the best ideas to get to the goals that we've set for ourselves. And he's someone who exemplifies that kind of ethos. So I'm so glad he's here to tell us a little bit about how he does it and why he does it the way he does it. So I think that's going to be great. But before we do that, I want to just take a second to bring to the front Richard Carter, one of Dr. Carter's sons, to give us, in some ways, a sort of shout out from the family, tell us a little bit about his investment in what I think hopefully they feel like is an important institutional legacy here in the school. After that, the next thing you'll hear will be the introduction for our guest speaker, Dr. Perry. So before that, just take a second, come on up and
thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you.
Well, praise God from whom all blessings flow. I'm actually very nervous this evening, and typically I don't get nervous when I speak. I think it's a sign that this is incredibly meaningful to me and for our family. A heartfelt thank you to Dr. Perry. I'm going to read for a moment so that I don't miss anyone. We're grateful to Dr. Jackson, Dean of the school, for resurrecting this lectureship, but it's a fellowship as well. To Bart Miltenberger, Timothy Wortham, Nadina Dang, all administrators within the school, we appreciate your efforts keeping things moving, perhaps when we lost sight of this tremendous opportunity to honor the legacy of our father. My brother Mark is here with his beautiful family. Mark, would you stand or raise your hand, please? He's here with his wonderful wife, Rebecca, and dynamic daughter, Eve Simone. My wife is ill this evening and sends her regards. She happens to be a social worker at the Rutgers School of Social Work in Camden, so a professor of social work, I should say. I'd like my two beautiful children to stand, Jordan Lewis Carter and Hannah Camille Carter. All right, I'm going to put this thing down and just share a few things with you. Circling back to my brother, he's actually a hero of mine. He's a graduate of then the School of Social Work. And for every person who my father leveled epistemologically, and rightfully so, they addressed it through my brother, who was a student at the school. But my brother's never said a mumbling word, persevered, and is doing great work as a result, living out this whole idea of being focused and purposeful. I also, too, have to recognize our dear mother, Dolores Pollard Carter. My father was considered to be this roaring lion, figure, mountain of a man, so to speak, in terms of his purpose, his commitment to addressing issues regarding institutionalized racism, being ahead of his time in many ways. Yet, when we lost our dear mother to heaven, the plane on which the lion roamed dissipated. And it was then that we got a sense of my dear mother's might, in that she really kept that lion roaring. I remember towards her end, she eventually had to succumb to the lung cancer that had attacked her body. I got a call from my father asking me to come from Wilmington to Philadelphia to help get my mother up. And when I arrived, my father looked at my mother and said, "Get up, Dolores." And she stood up. How she stood up, I don't know. But you know how when you reframe history and think about things in different ways, to the day that she died, she gave our father dignity, because her bones and body couldn't support her weight. But it was important for her, for him to be king. So God bless you, Mom. Just a few things about our father that I think are very important to know. I'd like everyone to say with me or after me, adverse childhood experiences. Can you say that? Adverse childhood experience. Lots of research out now about how the brain functions and how it's built around experiences. And when you have a collection, a series of unresolved trauma, literally your brain is shaped around experiences and impacts brain development. There are correlations between unaddressed and chronic trauma in childhood and disease later on in life. A few weeks ago, I was walking my dog down the road, That's how I relax. And I was speaking with my brother, and we were just talking like we normally talk, and he said, "You know that Dad witnessed a lynching, right?" And I said, "No, I didn't realize that." And he could not tell me the details of the story fast enough. Mark, I never told you this, but I was literally standing on a major thoroughfare in Wilmington, like, come on, but I didn't want to be rude because I needed to know. So as the story goes, my father and my brother and his brother, one of his 5 brothers who went to a one-room schoolhouse, were told never to travel down a certain road post-school by their father. But one day they decided to do so. And as they traveled down this road, Dr. Perry, they saw a lynching. Of course, they went home, apparently undetected, told their father about it, and their father said, never mention this again, primarily because he was concerned with the survival of the family. Lynching. Horrific in its cinematic presentation, but yet mild or mildly presented relative to what most lynchings turned out to be. These are public events for the uninitiated. Sometimes celebrations were held around it by town folks, picnics, if you will, at the risk of upsetting hearts and minds. Dismemberment was a part of lynching. Sexual assault was a part of lynching. The distribution of digits as souvenirs was a part of lynching. So I'm imagining our father, and his brother witnessing some form of this. I don't know what degree it was, but some form of this, and then being told for survival's sake, don't ever talk about it. Now, once my brother found out about it, he spoke to our uncle about it, our Uncle Bubby about it, who was a mature man around my father's generation, who still could not talk about it. He gave Mark bits and pieces, but he still could not talk about it. So I started to wonder, who was part of the lynching party? Was it the person who I walked by every day? Did he see me? Was it the husband of the school teacher? How does that play out? You know, there's a story that my father always used to tell about how the Klan showed up at his home when he was a child. And my grandfather came out on the porch and said, I might not be able to see through sheets, but my shotgun can. We always, we were in awe of that story and still are, and when did that story take place? Before the witnessing of the lynching or after the witnessing of the lynching? And just the questions abound. But imagine living under those circumstances. So our father would always talk about creative use of tension. So he figured out a way to, I would imagine, redirect that pain and to put it into something constructive, which led, of course, to his pedagogy and his actions. But there's a blessing in the storm in all of that. And sometimes the blessing comes in the form of events that seem tragic. Mark found out about the lynching because towards our father's end of his life, he was a victim of dementia. So Mark found out about it because Dad was in an elevator in his building in Center City, and he said to the folks in the elevator, are you going to the lynching? And that's when Mark started his investigation. The dementia, though, was a powerful gift for us in another way. Because, see, our dad was, we were trained to be soldiers. You know that scene in Fences where the son asks his father, why don't you like me? Never doubted that my father loved me, but I actually asked him that, not realizing that he'd seen a lynching. He knew what was at stake. He knew that the only protection was to know and go on. And he wasn't going to see his sons be vulnerable to the extent that he could control it. And I know that my dad loved me, and my brother and my mother. Yet he had this terrible ache that he never mentioned to us. I do remember once writing a paper on lynching and taking an incomplete. And I had to walk into the house and tell him, well, Dad, I had an incomplete, and I'll work on the paper this summer. And I can remember that he was particularly torqued about the fact that I had that incomplete. Now maybe I understand why. Maybe it was the subject matter. But he was the kind of person who, quick psychological mental reflexes. I remember towards the end of his career, I guess as he was declining, some faculty members perhaps thought it was time to take him out, so to speak. And one time, so the story goes, someone said to my dad at a faculty meeting, "You just sit there like a bump on a log." And without skipping a beat, my dad said, "Well, my father used to have me collect wood when I was young. That was my job. And he told me to collect the wood with the knots in it. Do you want to know why? Because the wood with the knots in it burns longer." See, that's you could not catch this cat, I'm telling you, ever. The dementia was a gift because it gave, I think, Mark and me a chance to see our dad without all of the armor. And that was the biggest blessing in the world. We would go out and laugh. My father was critiquing the NFL before this contemporary critique. Oh, they're gladiators, they're being exploited. What about the injuries? I mean, we couldn't watch a football game in our house. You know, when we wanted to watch an NBA Finals or an event, we had to sneak upstairs because if Dad got wind of it, we'd get the social critique, which is important. But sometimes you just want to, watch the game. But now, as a 50-year-old, I get it, and I thank you, Dad, for that. I remember, final thing, I remember praying once when Dad was in the nursing home. And if you know my father, I've never seen him defer to anyone, ever. Police, he did a program on police brutality in Wilmington and got into it with the chief, and the chief was saying, if you were out on the street, I would shoot you. This was this era. I mean, Dad didn't back down or back off and was so far ahead of his time. But I remember leaving him in the nursing home. I believe, Jordan, Hannah, you were with me, and Mom may have been with us as well. And we prayed. And as we were praying, I was leading the prayer, I peeked. And I saw an expression on Dad's face that I'd never seen before. Childlike, humble. Not that he was arrogant, but, he took the armor off. And I'd just like to say that it's important to me, and I think to Mark, that you know some of the fuel behind the fire. He was characterized by some, his detractors, as being an angry black man. I don't know how I would feel if I'd witnessed a lynching and then been told not to speak on it. I don't know how that tears at the soul. I've seen things in my life that has been relatively privileged that still gnaws at me. Could not be more honored, sir, that you were here. Appreciate your work. Appreciate you relaunching the lectureship. I salute you and I defer.
Every dreamer has a story. Dr. Steve Perry. Dr. Steve Perry, a mentor in the Dreamers Academy Speakers Resource Group, is a preeminent educator, author, TV host, and commentator. Prominently featured in CNN's Black in America series and in national forums, his passion for youth has fueled the dialogue on public education and produced positive change. Dr. Perry believes that every dreamer creates his own story.
You can be who you want to be. You can create your own reality. And if you allow the circumstances to define you, they will. I was born on my mother's 16th birthday. Third generation of poverty, but I don't believe a life is determined by where you start, it's where you finish. I grew up led to believe that intelligence is static, that you can't get smarter. But along the way, there were people who believed in me.
He became captain of the football team and volunteered in politics. Perry turned playing hard into working hard. He earned his bachelor's degree, his master's in social work, and his PhD in education. His other education, lessons that he learned as a kid, prepared him for greater challenges.
Of the 100 families who lived in the same project that I did, I'm the only guy who I know who went on to college. Coming here today makes me want to get back to work and do what I do and give every single one of these kids a legitimate fighting chance. This is where we played. The only way to win was to play longer and harder than anybody else. You let people know that you don't come to lose. So when they told me I couldn't open a school, every single person told me no, except for the last person. That's all I was looking for, was one yes, and I got it.
Each school day in his home is a quick goodbye to his wife and sons, and Perry is out the door to his other kids at Capitol Prep.
I wake up at 4:45 in the morning and I drive kids to school.
You take kids to school?
I do.
In your car?
I have to.
You pick them up?
Every day.
Why? You're the principal.
I know. I'm the bus driver in the morning, though. And if you walk the halls, I'm picking up papers. I'm a custodian. You do what you got to do to get it done.
Connecticut has one of the largest achievement gaps in the country, with black students averaging 3 grade levels behind white students.
When we started Capitol Prep, the graduation rate was 29%. So the successes that we've had are rooted in the fact that we've been able to send 100% of our graduates on to 4-year colleges.
Run, Michael, run! Run!
We don't have a bench. Everybody's a starter. We need everybody on the front lines saving our kids.
Kids kind of look to him to kind of be that fatherly figure. You know, you look in the stands, your mom and dad's not there, but there's Mr. Perry, you know, the principal.
And to be that father figure, there's something else he's figured out about saving our kids.
Every kid I've ever worked with who's been in a gang said they joined a gang for one reason. It's not protection, it's love. When you don't love yourself, what you tend to do is look for someone else to validate you.
Validation, love, and perseverance is how Dr. Perry changed his circumstances. It's how he's teaching our kids to pursue their college education and defy the odds.
Teaching to me is the single greatest act of defiance, because every single day you are encouraging children to snap reality in half and look into another world. You are asking them to dream beyond anything that has ever been dreamed. You are telling them that the impossible is no more. You are looking into their little souls and telling them that they have such big dreams, and you're going to fill them up with more. You're going to give them the knowledge that they need, the desire they need, the inspiration that they need, so that on this day they will change the world.
Every dreamer has a story. Dr. Steve Perry.
Thank you so much. A lot of y'all came in when this thing got started. It's truly a black event. We're just getting started. Thank you so much, Brother Carter and families. You know, I am sincerely humbled and honored to be here to pay some level of homage to your dad and your granddad. It's very difficult for me as an educator, as a social worker, because I spend so much time away from my own children that it's difficult to weigh the guilt. It's difficult to find a way to make sense of the call of responsibilities, the responsibility to the community and to the family. When I refer to my kids, I'm often talking about my kids, and many people don't know which kids I'm talking about, whether they're my sons or my students, because now my sons attend our school and they are our students. But I want to make sure that you know, as sons of a father who put so much on the line, that when he wasn't with you, and when he wasn't with you, he was with us, making days like this possible for kids all over this world. you will never know all the people whose lives your father touched. It is not possible. It is not possible because they don't even know that he touched their lives, because he sent out into the world people with the expectation of changing the world. And as a result of that, they have. So thank you. Thank you so much for having me here today. I also want to thank the University of Pennsylvania SP2, whatever y'all call yourselves now. So it is true that I have not been to the University of Pennsylvania at all since 1995 down at the field. I walked off and kept walking. Got my ring that I wear every single day. It says the University of Pennsylvania School of Social Work. It's essential that you understand that I've always identified myself as a social worker. And it's essential because I need you to understand what that means to me. I want us to have a conversation, and we will, about what social work means to me. I've had the opportunity to speak before various social work organizations. And in that conversation, I've made it clear that despite the fact that I run schools, our school is essentially a social service agency that uses as its tool to change the lives of young people. While we could be an addictions place, we could be a place that works with them around mental health. But in our case, it's education that's the service that we deliver. Our schools are designed like social service agencies. And in fact, what separates us from many schools is that we recognize that the affective side of the house, now everybody talks about the whole child, but the affective side of the house is what defines us. Working with the child, understanding that the child came to us as a person, complete with their challenges and opportunities for growth. I came to social work school in 1993, different than I am now. This suit would have fit better back then, but I wouldn't have been able to afford it. And then I came to the School of Social Work with the expectation that I was going to work with women, that I was going to be a man who worked with women who were in either abusive relationships or overcoming some form of sexual violence. I came to the University of Pennsylvania Social Work to deal with some old problems and look for some new solutions. I also came to the University of Pennsylvania School of Social Work because I wanted to understand what the challenges of the community were from an academic perspective, because growing up poor, being born on my mother's 16th birthday, having multiple family members incarcerated, I wanted to understand the roots of what was going on, because my plan was to be a politician. I was going to leave this place and go back to my hometown and be mayor of Middletown, Connecticut. As a young man who's here who I played Little League Baseball with. Talk about a small world. So mine was a really simple plan. And the reason I share that, especially with those of you who are students, is because just because you came here with a certain set of expectations, that is not necessarily what you will end up doing with your life, because there are new solutions being formed every day for old problems. And just because we think that we know the solution, it doesn't mean that it is so. In 1995, the scary Republican was Bob Dole. Y'all would elect Bob Dole right about now. You liberal, Northeasterners, Ivy Leaguers, y'all will be Bob Doling it all day long. Things change. And we see ourselves looking for new solutions to old problems. You know, when I was in a social work school, I went to Strawberry Mansion as my field placement. Very beautiful named school in a very, very ugly place. During that time in 1993, we couldn't stay after school for games. The basketball games were closed to spectators for fear of violence. In fact, I used to get a ride from 30th Street. This young woman who's white, well, every woman who was at social work school was white. Look, y'all invited me. It's not my fault. You accepted all the white people. It's not my fault. So she would give me a ride back and forth to our field placement. And I would tell her, I used to call her Tracy Liss. I said, Tracy Liss, I just want to let you know, something jumps off, I am running. And my suggestion is you do the same damn thing. Because they may not want witnesses. The problems that I thought that we were facing at that point were micro. I figured if I sat with this child named Gerald, who at 14 could not read the word stop if you took it off of a stop sign, that if I taught Gerald how to read, then I in fact would solve the problem. Back in 1993, it seemed really simple. All I needed to do was to make sure that our family group or the school within a school that we were working in was providing these children with mental health support. And if I did that, then what we would do is we would solve the problem for that group. I could show Gerald, if I just sat with them, that he didn't have to be a drug dealer if I just talked to him long enough, because I'm from where he's from and I see what he sees. And if he just would listen to me, then we could just change this thing. It threw a good conversation, except for the fact that Gerald taught me at 14 that the drug dealer that he knew wasn't such a bad guy in his eyes, because he rented out a bus that took them to Wildwood. And Gerald had more food in his refrigerator than I did as a grad student. I used to refer to my refrigerator as furniture, because it served as much of a purpose on its side as it did upright. I would put water in there just to make sure it still worked. Now, Philadelphia water is a different taste than water, so I didn't necessarily drink it. But what we come into this conversation thinking is not what we will come out knowing. Looking for new solutions to new problems or to old problems, we have to start to look at ourselves. What I thought I knew of my own community, I had to relearn. I got turned out when I read the autobiography of Malcolm X in undergrad. You couldn't tell me nothing. I'm light-skinned, but I'm jet black inside. And as somebody with the white mother constantly having to proclaim his race, it became clearer to me that I had to identify myself and sometimes over-identify myself in such a way, romanticizing what it was to be black. Trying to find a way to have a conversation as an African American, not understanding that black people are just people. I remember going home to my grandmother's house, who had grown up in a little town in North Carolina, a sharecropper. Coming home so excited to be able to tap into my roots, connect with the degradation of a community, see the power within that. And I came home enlightened, ready to explore what that meant. And I asked her what it was like growing up poor on a farm in North Carolina in the 30s. Tell me a story, Grandma. She looked at me. She said, we was poor. I said, I'm aware of that, Grandma. That's the part that I knew. Kind of look for something a little deeper so I could take it back to the kids at school and impress them with how black I am. She looked at me. I said, tell me about the white people. She said, they was poor too. I said, Grandma, apparently you have some trouble remembering how tough it was for you growing up there. I've read about it, so I know. She said, people is people and po is po. We was all po and they was people. I said, that ain't the dumbest damn thing I've ever heard in my entire life. So when I graduated and went back to Connecticut, armed with this social work degree and all this good information, I had to find a way to make it make sense, because I came into this thing to change the world. But the direction that I was heading had me changing one life at a time. And what I was recognizing is that a frontline social worker wasn't for me. Because when I was doing that, what I found was that I was working with Gerald for 45 minutes only to send him back into North Philly for 23 hours and 15 minutes that brought him to me in the first place. I had done nothing to change his conditions. And so I figured I needed to get back deeper to the root of the problem. So I went back to Connecticut instead of running for office immediately. What I did was I ran a homeless shelter. Because there I could work with those women and get them in a position to be able to help them with their kids, if necessary, get them back, because it was an adult shelter, which meant that there could be no children. That's a tough way to go. And when I got there, the first night I was there, I saw this girl that I used to like in high school. And I thought, this is really dope, because she must work here, and I have a degree from the University of Pennsylvania, so I'm about to be really impressive to her. So I asked her how long she'd been working there. Said she was a guest in the shelter. Just because you think you know the problem today, it doesn't mean that the solutions that you thought you were going to be able to use are going to be at your disposal. I couldn't counsel her. I know how she got there. One of the reasons I didn't get with her, because she was with my cousin, who's a drug dealer. And I know he got her on that stuff because he was on that stuff. But I remember those points along the way where I thought that, man, she's as smart as I was. If honest, I cheated off her paper, so arguably she was probably smarter than I was. But here in this space, in this beautiful Ivy League space where it all seems so possible, what I implore you to do is to recognize that just because you're some of the smartest people in the country, it doesn't mean that you're the smartest person in the country. That the problems that we're facing are still unfolding before us. And who would have thought that Bob Dole would become Donald Trump? Some of y'all still don't believe it. Some of you still think you're going to wake up and it's going to be different. But the fact is that we have found ourselves in a place where we have allowed our own myopic perspectives to limit our access to solutions. So I thought I was going to run for office, and I did. And I lost. Best thing that ever happened to me. Except for getting fired from the job I had when I ran for office and I talked about the place where I was working. Typically not a good idea. Don't go and work at a school that frames itself as diversity university and then start talking about diversity. They get real mad. They start firing people. They fired your boy. Thank you. Good looking out. And so in that space, what I began to see was all these solutions that I was looking for, all these places that I was going with the expectation of finding a way to pull African American people in particular, poor people of all colors in general, into a place of light where they could enjoy what God had in store for them. I kept going and opening doors only to find that the door that I opened did not lead me to the place that I thought I was going to go. Yet this degree gave me the capacity to consistently look at myself. The most important thing the social work degree gave me was the responsibility to check myself, was the courage to be honest with myself about my selfness. the things that I was dealing with. Why was I thinking the things that I was thinking and not thinking about other things? What was I going to do? It made me responsible to be self-aware. There is no more important part of the process of finding solutions than to look inside yourself and see why you keep looking in the same places for new solutions and wondering why all you come up with is yet another problem. So my plan was simple. Once the election thing went forward, I started a not-for-profit organization that worked with students from historically disadvantaged populations in preparation for college. An Upper Bound program. Started an Upper Bound program because I had been through an Upper Bound program. Again, using what I had experienced in my own life, trying to find a way to get solutions. The problem was that the Upper Bound program only serviced 120 kids. So I went from 1 to 120, which for a little while was good, but it wasn't good enough because I felt empty still. I was sending the kids that we had selected on to four-year colleges, but I wasn't really changing it. And I knew that because a mother came to me at the end of a summer and she said very clearly, this is the best my child has ever done in school. I said, well, thank you. And she said, why is it that only rich kids get good schools? Now, there I was thinking that I was the guy who was the Rage Against the Machine who told the University of Pennsylvania, I ain't going back to no Ivy League school. I'm staying in the hood. I'm going to live and work in the hood. I'm going to do what I have to do. I turned my back on all this stuff intentionally. I left on purpose. I was going back to get my credentials one way or another to prove myself not just to be black, but committed to my community. So I was going back, and this was about as anti-black experience as I had. So I was on a motorcycle speeding out of here. But there I was sitting in this office with a white woman who was poor, asking me why I wasn't doing something to help more people. And she was right. She needed a hand. And so my plan was simple. What we were going to do is we were going to put together a group of black people, all black people, and we were going to start a school for just black people, just to prove that race didn't matter. I know it doesn't make sense when you hear it now, but then it made a lot of sense. Because I had something to prove. I had to show that I really was black, light-skinned for sure, looked like I speak Spanish, not a lick. But I was going through the same thing that I went through when I came to the school because I was trying to find solutions to old problems, things that had existed in my own life, trying to find them somewhere other than inside myself. And so I wasn't forced to be honest, and I was at points not being honest about the education I had received, which required me to think about myself, to think about how I thought, to be in this metacognitive place, to push myself to be uncomfortable in order to find the comfort that I was seeking. I wasn't doing that. I was constantly looking somewhere else. And so we as black people, because we like to meet, nobody holds a meeting better than black people. We got Robert's rules. We got the whole thing down through the chair. There's only 4 people in the room, brother. You the chair. And we had a fantastic first meeting, except for the fact that we have yet to have a second meeting. But that first one was awesome. It was at my house, around the dining room table, where all great black businesses and organizations had been formed. Only to find out that I had erred again because I was putting myself in a position where I was only looking in one place for the solution and thereby losing out on so many other resources. See, I see so many people doing that now. Sadly, because we do have a president who is a moron, we are connecting him to all other people who may share some of his political beliefs. And as a result, what we're doing is missing out on very talented people who don't look like us, who don't say the same things that we say, who don't worship at the same places we worship, and if they worship at all. But we're losing out on some fantastic opportunities for dialogue around solutions. And we, those of us who want to help people, are not helping people because we're not looking at ourselves and asking ourselves the question, why is it that I won't work with someone who I believe to be so inherently different than myself? put together a team. Bagansky, Wojnards, Capralis, Williams, and Ali, just to keep it funky. And we opened our first school. And the people I found myself fighting most often were people who looked just like me. Black people, Latino people. I couldn't understand it because it didn't make sense. If I proclaimed my blackness as loudly as I could, I declared that I was committed to the community. It seemed almost guaranteed if I cast aside being given the opportunity to go to a fantastic institution like this, and I was just down. I was just down with the cause, just in the community, in the hood, then people would just see that I was really real. And they would support me just because it was the right thing to do. It was a good idea. What could be wrong about sending kids to college who had never had access to college? What could be wrong about teaching little girls that they were beautiful people just because they were? That they wouldn't have to live with the ugliness of the rape or the sexual assault that they had experienced at some point in their lives. To teach young men that they could be young men without hurting other people, and that they could be handsome and beautiful and smart and all those things. Who could be against that? And then who could be against that who was a person of color in a position of authority? How could it happen? It's not possible. Except for it was, and it is. Except for that's exactly what was happening, and that's exactly what still happens today. That an enemy wears no particular color, comes from no particular community. People who are enemies unto themselves. It doesn't matter who they are or where they came from. It's where they are now and where they're going. In order for me to make the most out of this social work education that I had, it wasn't so much about what I got from every single class. It was about the process that was about learning about myself. I remember sitting in the racism content, which was usually me and like 18 white women, turning it into some sort of group session around their mess, like I signed up for this. Like I'm paying to listen to you. But what I lost when I sat there, frustrated with them dealing with their stuff so openly, y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, wow, this is a lot of information for class. Can we go to the article? Because I read last night. And I'm trying to get to this thing right here. Know about you. Apparently you didn't read. So me and the professor, we're going to do some things for about an hour or so. We'll cut you in when it's your turn. What I had to keep reminding myself, and the reason why I wear this ring, is because it tells me you got to think about yourself, man. You got to think about the way you're thinking. You have to be in that space. You have to constantly wonder why you're wondering the things you're wondering, why you are or are not affiliating with certain groups or individuals, why you are not seeing people for who they are, what it is about you. Why would you paint with such broad brushes when you know that no one could paint you with such a brush? It was my community who supported us, and it was members of our community that worked against us. In fact, people who I thought when I was growing up should have been on our side. My mother worked at Pratt & Whitney, and so she was in the union. And other family members, they were all in the union. So I grew up thinking that the best thing to do is to be in the union, except for the fact that when I started schools and we started to fight against this machine, no one but the union was standing on the other side. Except for a bunch of lames that they could pay off to make them do their bidding. These people would sit in the office and tell me why it couldn't be done. And all I would say to them, look, if you can't do it, no problem. But do you mind if I try? Do you mind if I try to teach Black, Latino, and poor children to read? Is it all right if I do it? I'm not asking you to do it, but do you mind if I give it a shot? See, people are committed to the system in more ways than we could ever imagine. When I was looking for new solutions for old problems, I didn't even recognize what the real problem was. I was pointing to the wrong people. I was looking for political parties, not people. I was looking for races, not people. I wasn't listening to what my grandmother said, which was people is people. I didn't get it until I had to get it. Until after sending 100% of our students to 4-year college for 10 years, 100% for 10 years in a school system in which 29% of the children were graduating from high school. We sent 100% of our graduates to 4-year college, had an average daily attendance of over 98%. Had an inverse achievement gap. You heard it. Black kids, Latino kids outperforming white kids in our school. One would think, hey man, open more schools. Why can't you open more? In our final year of running that school, 2,700 children on a waiting list for 50 seats. 2,700 children on a waiting list for one school. I was told the same things. Black people don't care about education. They don't work that hard to it. Well, then what the hell? They seemed like they wanted to get in pretty damn bad from where I was standing. But because I had always looked at the same people as the problems, I was not seeing where the problems lied, which was in certain people. And so as we were in this space, ready to open more schools, it was a Latino brother who's a Board of Education member in Hartford, claimed to be down with the cause, said in an open meeting, we will not let you open another school in the city of Hartford. He said it would be too much power for one man if you did that. White liberal woman, liberal, supposed to be on my side. White, Northeastern, supposed to be on my side. We supposed to hate Bob Dole together. She said, your kids are just different than the other kids. What I need us to understand in this space that we're in order to find new solutions to old problems, we have to recognize that the old problem is us. If belief is a construct, the question is not what you believe, but what you construct. I had constructed this old notion of who was on our side and who wasn't. I had constructed this old notion of who our was and who our was not. I had teams mixed up. I had players mixed up. I had it all wrong. People really is people. And Poe really is Poe. And what defines us is not what we think typically defines us, but in fact, it is our response to the circumstances that truly defines us. It is the way we think about ourselves in this space as problem solvers. Social work to me is social, societal work at its core, whether you do it with individuals or a group, whether you do it as a politician or as a researcher, whether you do it as a clinician or a faculty member. It is about changing the way in which the world operates by changing the only person who you have any control over, which is you. If you learn anything about this social work experience, what I hope you learn while you're learning it or teaching it is that you should be learning about how you learn, learning about what you have learned and how what you have learned and what you do impacts where you look for solutions and who you see as on your side. So here on out, I'm on team get it done. Talk about me. Kick me out. Say I ain't black. I tried it. It didn't work out all the time. So I'll be black for some people, and some people I won't be black enough, and that's all right with me. Some people I'll be down, for other people I won't be down enough. Some people I'll be edgy and urban, and others I won't be edgy and urban enough. I'm not here for them. I have to recognize the only way I get access to the solutions is to look inside myself and constantly question how I got here and where I'm going from here. I can't solve problems using somebody else's metrics. I have to use the tools that I have. If I learned anything from being at this school, what I learned was that I have to know me as a learner and liver. I remember I used to be over at the library. This is when people actually had to go to the library. And I'd spend 2 hours looking for an article, only to find some lame had ripped the whole damn thing out. Woo, we almost got into a couple fights at the University of Pennsylvania. But what I have had to learn from then to now is that it is you who determines your team. Our success as schools is not determined by the color of my colleagues, but the content of their character. Many people will come to me and they'll say, hey, man, you got a lot of black people working on your staff. I have a lot of talented people working on my staff. I will fire a black person faster you can say Jackie Robinson. I will fire a white person faster you can say Nipsey Russell. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care what color you are. If you're not providing right for my kids, I will fire you politely but completely. We have to look at ourselves and recognize that too often so many of us are still stuck on trying to be a part of a group, still trying to stay part of an old solution, an old team, when that team never was really a team. That team never was a team. We were sold a bad bill of goods. My grandmother was trying to tell me something I wasn't willing to listen to. Just because somebody looked different than me, just because it was a certain geography within which they lived, that didn't tell me about who they were as people. And we can't write somebody's experiences off because they don't connect with what we've assigned them to be. We can't just determine who somebody is because they're gay. We can't just determine somebody is because they're straight, because they're Christian, because they're Muslim. We don't know. You don't know. Stop assuming. Either way, it doesn't work. I've tried it. I promise you. I've formed groups of every group and have quit those same groups. But what I have seen that's been consistent is when I fight with people who fight. When I'm riding with fighters, we're going to fight. And we're going to win. When you're riding with people who don't want to fight, they're going to talk a whole bunch and get your behind hurt. Earlier we had dinner, and I was talking about how I had recently started a relationship with, it sounds really tawdry. I recently met... I know it's a Friday night and all sorts of things are going on around campus, but easy. Recently met the Koch Brothers. There you go. I did the same thing. And that's the point. And that right there, our reaction is the point. I no more want somebody to judge me just by my name than I want anybody to judge anybody by their name. If you can't assign something that you've seen that you find distasteful to such a person, then don't. Because that's what I was doing too often. And as a result, missing out on tremendous opportunities to work with very, very talented people. I have people on our staff right now who are some of the most conservative Republicans. I can think of one right now. But I tell you what, you want somebody to teach your kid kindergarten, you better call her. Because she'll make sure he can read. She'll make sure he can do math. She didn't see his color. We have to get to a place where we're looking for new solutions. And I believe, I submit to you that the newest solution is to look for new teams. We have to shuffle up the deck and play this hand out better than we've been playing it out so far. Maybe even play a new game. Maybe it's not spades tonight. Maybe it's something different. Maybe it's something different that causes us to look at ourselves and wonder, why is it that I'm not getting the results that I want? Well, maybe it's you. Maybe it's your strategy. Maybe you keep working with the same people who, by and large, are going to keep you where you are. And as a result, keep the systems in place. I have since found, get ready to go to some questions. I've since found that the most radical thing I can do, of all the things I thought I would do that would be radical, is to teach children to read, write, and do math who are never supposed to learn to do it. What makes me so offensive to the teachers' unions is that I say that just because a child is poor, just because they are black, just because they live in a single-parent household, just because their parents are incarcerated, just because they live in a certain area code, that does not mean that they cannot be taught to read. That's the most radical thing I guess I've ever said. And that I know that there are groups that are consciously committed to making sure that this old solution, that for the record, for people of color in particular, and for most people in general, has actually never even worked. This old school system, the one that says that you go to school closest to your house, has never worked. Never. If it had, then we wouldn't have had a case in 1954. I know sometimes we as African Americans think, well, it used to be better back. Well, not necessarily. Data says differently. The Supreme Court say differently. The NAACP used to say differently until the teachers union started paying them, in which case now they say different than they used to say before. I've been on a whole bunch of teams. I've carried cards for many organizations. I'm different now. I'm comfortable in my skin. I know what I stand for, and I don't have to proclaim it to anybody, whether it's the essay that I wrote to get into the University of Pennsylvania or it's the life that I live every single day. My question to you is, what are your new solutions to old problems? How will you make the fundamental changes that you need to make inside you, regardless of age, regardless of circumstances? Because last time I checked, as long as you're upright, you're still in the game. How will you change your organizations, whether it be your church, whether it be your mosque or synagogue? How will you change the organizations that you are a part of to better meet the needs of our community? Because for me, social work is societal work. I get offended when people call themselves social workers who don't have a social work degree. I ain't gonna lie to you. I'll tell you, no, you are not a social worker. No, it's kind of like social work, man, but it's not. Yeah, but I mean, it's like sociology. That's sociology. Otherwise, they would have called it social work. Social work degree is a social work degree because it means something to me. What it means to me is that I've been trained to think differently. I have been trained by people like Professor Carter and others to think differently, to look at a problem critically, and to ask the problem how it wants to be solved. Not just what I bring to it, but what do you need, problem? How do you need to be solved? Not what's the appropriate team to be on to solve this problem. Well, we have young black men that we want to work with, so we got to get old black men. Or not. How about we get some people who love kids? And those people may be women. They may be peers. They may be white. They may be black, Latino. Because last time I checked, my bench is real thin right about now. I don't know about you in your social service agencies, but it's thin. Not just in people, but damn sure in talent. The new solution for me to old problems is to constantly assess myself as a social worker and ask myself, what are you doing to put yourself in a position to gain as much ground with as many people with as much talent to solve these old problems? No matter what your age is in this room, you're going to die in a country where there's racism. No matter what your age is in this room, you're going to die in a country where there is sexism, homophobia, and on and on and on. Old problems. But what if for a moment the new solution was we started with ourselves and looked at our own racism, sexism, classism, homophobia in a very real way? Start to challenge the way that we look at the world. Then maybe there'll be one less racist, classist, sexist, homophobic person in the world. I came to the social work school initially to help myself. I thought I would use my talents throughout my community and world to change the world. I'm at a place again in my life where I recognize my social work degree will help me. It will help me be a better person. At the end of the day, if there's one more good person, that's a lot more than we had the day before. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Answer some questions? So I'm going to answer some questions. This is when it gets really fun. And if they can't get a mic to you fast enough, I will repeat it. Go ahead, sis. It's fantastic. So I had a meeting with the Koch brothers. I'll take a quick step back and tell you how I connected with them initially. I had been told by the commissioner of the State Department of Education, a liberal white man, Democrat, started a charter school, our team, and the governor of Connecticut, that they wanted me to open more schools in the state of Connecticut. And I said, that's cool, I'll do that. Though I was prepared to open schools in New York. Joe Klein, who was the commissioner of the New York City's public schools, and Bloomberg were really, really open to opening charter schools, which when I was in school, there was no such thing as charter schools. And they just started 3 years before I started at Penn. So I couldn't even think of opening charter schools when I was in school because there was no such thing. So I had gone to war, I thought, for the current governor and the commissioner. And they said to me, essentially, at least the commissioner in particular said, we got you. You open some schools here in Connecticut. Just don't go to New York. Just hold tight for New York. Stay here in Connecticut. Do that. Whereas New York was really aggressive. They were saying, look, how many can you open in a year? Can you get 5? Can you get whatever? They would like, let's go, let's go. Do you want to come down and run all of our charter schools, 125? What do you want to do? So I, staying on the same team, got to stay local. Don't want people to think that I'm trying to do something for myself. Don't want people to think I'm trying to get too big. So I got to stay in Connecticut, got to stay in Middletown, Connecticut, where I grew up, 1 mile from the housing project that I was in. I got to stay in that place. Got to do it. Got to keep it real. So I didn't venture out. And I got a call. I was on my way to Wichita, Kansas. And I had been asked to speak at a church because a pastor who was there had heard me speak somewhere else, and I had talked to some pastors about opening their own schools. And so this pastor had taken me up on my word, and he actually had opened his own school in Wichita. Opened his own school in Wichita, which, by the way, the teachers union then came in and made sure that no other school buildings, no other public buildings could be turned over to non-for-profits for schools. They would leave them vacant, then let them be turned into a school. True story. I digress. So, I had landed in Wichita, and when I got off the plane, I got a call from the commissioner. He said, hey, I got some good news, I got some bad news. How bad could the bad news be? Because for 2 years, he's been telling me about these opening schools here in Connecticut, so what are we talking about? I'm not going to open 5, I'm only going to open 2-ish, right? He says, Dr. Perry, bad news is you're not going to get a chance to open a school. This is my boy. This is my team. It's my liberal friends, my people, mi gente. It's supposed to be on my side. So I cussed him out. Like people on my side are supposed to get cussed out. With a lot of F words and other things. That is a true story. I had a lot of pastors on my board. I called them immediately after. Pastor, I just want to let you know I did some bad things with my mouth. I just need you to understand, I cussed the commissioner of the State Department of Education out. F word is a noun, a verb, adjective, conjunction. It had I took it all over the English language. So after that, I got in a car the sister picked me up in Wichita to take me to this event. So she says to me and whispered, so I asked, what's the good news? He said, well, you get to apply again. So I cussed him out some more. So that is true. So I get in the car. The sister's come to pick me up from the airport, and she says to me, hey, Dr. Perry, I just want to let you know this event is funded by the Koch brothers. Right? When somebody says something to you that's for effect, it's funded by the Koch brothers. And I was like, Coca-Cola? She's like, no, the Koch brothers. Like, sis, it's just me in the car. Like, I'm not sure where the whisperings come. I don't know is that for effect. I'm in a bad mood right now. You got to help me here. She said the Koch brothers is conservative white guys. Like, a lot of people don't like them. And I said, did they pay for the whole thing? She said, yeah, they paid for the whole thing. I said, everything? Like, yep. Any strings attached? No. I said, what the hell is you talking about? Like, we going to a black church to talk to black people and the white person paid for it, and you're mad about that? Are you bugging? Like, this is the problem with, like, what are we doing? Wrong team. So I went there. I was still kind of hot. And I spoke, and there were a couple people from the Koch organization there. And I said, I didn't know they were there. I didn't know who it was. I was going to say what I was going to say. It didn't matter to me. And they ended up funding. They are now one of the biggest funders of our schools. No strings attached. In addition to that, they brought me out to this event that they do where they bring in a bunch of really wealthy people who give money to give away. And when I was there, I didn't know who, I just ended up standing next to Charles. I ended up standing next to Charles, and he said, hey, you're Dr. Steve Perry. I really like your work. And I was like, hi, yeah. And he said, I'm Charles. I was like, whoa, like Coke? And he is as humble a cat as I've met. He and his wife are just awesome, 52 years of marriage. So you see them together, they're sitting holding hands. They believe in a lot of the same things that I believe in. Do we agree on everything? No, my wife and I just did a bathroom. Trust me, you don't have to agree with somebody on everything to live together. It's not that deep. And I think part of our problem is always that we're looking for somebody who is absolutely ideologically connected to us, and that's the wrong thing. Where we work together, we work together. He's a grown man. I'm a grown man. He can't make me do anything, and I can't make him do anything, nor should I expect to. We share ideas. Where we work, we work. Where we don't, we don't. When we're on the same team, we're on the same team. We're not, we're not. But for the most part, we're on the same team. I don't think that a person who's conservative should be coming and shouted off campus any more than a person who's liberal should be coming and shouted off campus. There was a time when we were the ones getting shouted off campus. I don't think it's cool. If it was wrong then, it's wrong now. So the conversations like that have been open and honest. He asked me to be the keynote. At this group, there was one brother there who acted like he couldn't speak. Y'all seen him before. Like, look, bro, I know you with these people. I ain't trying to take that. I ain't gonna tell. You can say hi. So, but in that space, I said what I've said to you. Much in the same way I've said it to you, which is we have to find a way to work together. This is bad, man. Like, I don't know what y'all are looking at. I don't know what you see. I'm scared. I think reasonable people should be afraid. I go to black communities all over this country. It's not going well for us. I don't know if any of y'all have seen it lately, because I recognize some of us, we do really, really well, so we end up integrating neighborhoods and forgetting. That's all right. I get it. I integrated a neighborhood. They watched me move in. I thought, wow, who knew that moving in was so interesting? No, white people standing just looking, just like. And the guy who sold them the house, is a true story. The guy who sold us the house told them that I was a professional baseball player. Aside from the fact I was never good at baseball, I asked Chef Schiffer back there. Yeah. So the point is that People really is people. You got to give people a chance. This is part of our problem. We keep writing people off, and we don't really have that many people. We really don't. We got to find a way to work some things out. We do. Some people are not on the good side. And a lot of times, the reason why some of us get sold out is because we believe in people who we thought we were always supposed to believe in, and we give them lock, stock, and barrel. Again, I'm a Democrat, always have been. But the Democrats have not really helped us. Because if they had, we wouldn't be as jammed up as we are. How many cities have been run by not just Democrats, but black Democrats? How about that one, right? And you look and you think, well, I'm on that team and I'm not doing better. And I'm on that team and I'm on 2 of his teams and I'm 3. Black, male, Democrat, and I'm still getting jacked up. We have to recognize that there are people who want to maintain the system. And what we don't often realize is that some people who we think are against us are actually working on the same stuff for us. I will argue, I'll submit to you, though I didn't vote this way, that the vote for President Obama and the vote for President Trump were both protest votes. It's just the damn thing swung too far. And the protests on this side, they went haywire. The point I'm making is my conversations with the Koch brothers, mostly Charles, I don't speak to his brothers much, but mostly Charles, have been thoughtful, thought-provoking, and where we agree, we agree. Where we don't, we don't. And I'll go here. Much in the same way that before I speak, for instance, I'll sometimes speak before liberal groups, and they'll pull me aside and try to tell me what to say. Literally. Tell me what to say. How I shouldn't offend people. How we should just be uplifted. Which means don't say anything. Yeah, when Alec asked me to come in, yes, Alec asked me to come in. So I spoke at Alec one week, and then the next week spoke at the Urban League. Alec is a think tank, a very, very, very conservative think tank. Some people credit them for doing a lot of bad things. I said the same thing to them that I said to the Urban League. Same thing. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. You don't want me to say it? Don't ask me to come. Watch YouTube. I recognize that we have to find a way to open up our minds. One of the things that used to frustrate me when I was here was it seemed like there was just one acceptable belief system. And that's very troubling because you can't learn that way. I remember one of the first gay friends that I had was here in graduate school. Because I had always grown up thinking that if I'm friends with a gay man, then everybody's going to think I'm gay, so I can't be his friend. Sean was one of the coolest cats I ever, like, he just was cool. Blonde, the gayest man on earth. And he and I, that was my boy. But I didn't get it, I would not have gotten a chance to know that, like, that he and I could be friends, and it didn't make me gay. As if becoming gay was a possibility. Like, boof, you're gay. Oh, snap. So in the same way that we open ourselves up to what we believe are these different mindsets, I'm suggesting we have to keep opening ourselves up. Sit down with somebody different than you, man, for real. Read a book from another person that you wouldn't otherwise. So this summer, I read Charlemagne the God's book, Black Privilege, and Charles Koch's Good Prophet. Those 2 books I read while writing my next one. And if you just take a second, you'll see really clear themes in both of them. Charlemagne the God, Charles Koch. Both of them talk about how, each one of them, talk about how they went through their own struggles. Charlemagne talks about getting locked up and the like. Charles talks about going to 8 schools, getting kicked out of 1. Right? You don't know somebody till you know somebody. It's all too easy. We don't want people to make assumptions about us. We got to stop making assumptions about other people. Because we're missing out on it, man. We are really missing out. There's so many things that because I grew up a particular way, I see it in my students, and it scares me. You grow up a certain way. Tell me if this happened to you, especially African Americans. Oh, we don't eat that. Like, if you eat something or you do something, they're kicking you out. like, well, you cannot possibly be black. You ate sushi? Nah, we cook everything. We fry every fish. Every fish has to, I don't care how good it is, we gonna drop it in some boiling hot, set you on fire grease. We cook it one way. Grease it up to kill you. And so for so long, because I was uncomfortable in my own skin, wasn't clear on who I am, I found myself robbing myself of certain things and just not doing them, because to do them, like, who would go to Europe and be black? If I'm going somewhere, I'm going to Africa. Well, both of them's kind of far to me, so can I go somewhere closer? But the reason why in the past I wouldn't participate in certain things is because I thought that if I did, then people would see me do it, and then they would think that I was no longer part of my group. And how many amazing things have I robbed myself of because of that? I'm coming here, then over here, then over here. Yes.
Open up, talk to people different from you. And I try to do that. I try to sort of like step out of my cultural bubble and talk to other people. But I always find myself like overthinking, what if I say something very offensive and I don't even know? Or so I'm just overthinking, and then I don't really get to say what I want to say, and then I come off as like a boring person and never connect. So like, how do I get around that?
That's really hard, and I really appreciate your courage right there, because that is the challenge. That really is the challenge, right? Because a lot of people don't act like they can take a joke. And a lot of people don't give people room to just, I don't know what certain people want to be called. You know what I mean? Like, some people want to be called certain things, and I'm thinking I'm riding with you, and then I say, you're gay. And like, who do you say? I don't know what I'm sorry. If that offends you in particular, I got to respect that. But you got to give me space to know that I don't know everything that everybody wants to be called. I think most people, if you come with pure heart and mind, I think most people will take you at face value, and you create the opportunities to have a conversation. Listen also, very, very important. Because I'm where you are. It wouldn't seem like it, but in a space where I'm not up here, I'm probably much more of an introvert than you could ever imagine. And I mean, I have a party at my house and go downstairs, like, and leave everybody. Like, where's Steve? He's gone somewhere. And what I do, because I get away, because I work with kids, I just take all the kids downstairs, because I really don't like adults that much. So me and the kids just be downstairs playing games, chilling, hanging out, doing stuff like we do. But even understanding that there's a real challenge in just expressing and owning and learning. And that's something that we all have to go through. But again, I say it is worth it. I remember Sean, and there was a woman, we were like The Real World or something, right? So they got the straight black man, angry, because, right, that's all I could be here was angry. Sean, and then there's this woman from the Deep South. She was like a Southern belle, like such a typical, you know what I mean? Like, that was her thing. And the three of us talking about one day being able to buy fine china. On the subway. Meanwhile, I'm splurging if I can spend $350 to go to one of the Chinese food trucks to get something. I don't even know what China is, but I'm trying to be in the conversation. Like, China, like, what is that, a plate or a place? I'm going right.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hitler could read. He could write, and he could do math. Education is a humanizing experience. So Martin Luther King, in his later days or years, talked to us about the three evils of this particular society: racism, economic oppression, and militarism, all of which we are facing right now because of Trump, all right? So my question is, how is the curriculum in your schools addressing what we need to do in terms of raising human beings?
So thank you for your question. I'm going to push back a little bit. If Trump were gone today, there'd still be racism and oppression. But I'm push back in a second. So what we're doing is, our theme is social justice. Our schools are organized around the notion of social justice. We believe that our children have to not just learn to read to be able to say a word, but to learn to read to be able to say something. And what the expectation is that we have created an environment within which children learn about who they are as people, beyond their culture, beyond their neighborhood, into themselves. And to create such an environment where they're compelled to see that there's something beautiful and profound inside of all of them. I'll give you a quick for instance. So we opened up an elementary school this year in Bridgeport, Connecticut, which doesn't mean much to most of you except for it's a really poor community. I think Chester, something like that, like Chester, Coatesville, parts of that, like that area, right? Thank you, Camden, Trenton, same thing, right? Same. So sad that they're all the same, right? Cookie cutter. You have they all right, dilapidated old structures, the whole thing, right? You can see that it used to be beautiful at one point, but it's a long way away from that. So we opened up a new school. In our third grade, only 5% of the children can do math on grade level. Only 10% can read on grade level. I went into one of our classrooms first week of school, and there was a little boy. Every classroom has what we refer to as an objective reporter. So what we're learning today, they will tell you what they're learning. So this young man went up to be the objective reporter. He came to me, and our objectives read as follows. I know how to and insert whatever the skill is, like let's say find the main idea to a story because I can identify 3 key characteristics. That's how our objectives typically read. I know how to because I can. This young man said, he was 11, no, who, he's 11, cannot read a word. In order for us to teach that young man to read, we have to teach him he deserves to know how to read. That he's a powerful little Latino boy who's going to take this world by storm. And those words will not stand in his way. So I was in there yesterday. He came up again. He was fired up. He did it again. He got past no and how. That may not mean anything to you, folks. That's pretty big in 3 weeks. This boy's reading now. He didn't get all the rest of it. But what we do ultimately is teach them that they are amazing people. And in so doing, that this reading stuff, this ain't nothing, like you're saying. This ain't nothing. They can get the words up. They can get the words up. We just got to build them up. Yes, ma'am.
I'm really happy that you're here.
Thank you.
I'm not a social worker. I'm an art teacher, and I teach in an area, Trenton, New Jersey, where 80% of our students are Latino and maybe 2% are white and the rest African American. But I teach test babies, and I'm teaching them art. And my challenge is to, when I demonstrate and show examples and bring props in, for them not to copy. So I'm trying to teach them to think outside the box and to be creative thinkers and problem solvers. And as an educator, I need your help.
Yeah, so that's a great question. She was saying that, and I'm going to presume that in her school, that there's a heavy emphasis on testing. And that's a broader conversation, but I'll say this. Kids will learn what people who love them want them to learn. This is true. And so when they know that you genuinely love them, as I'm sure that they do, what matters to you will matter to them. And they will push to the direction that you think is important. So that's the first part of it. The second part is, it's frustrating for all of us to work in an environment that's inconsistent with who we are. And one of the challenges I put out there for all of us, regardless of what your field is to encourage your colleagues to see things differently. That there's another way to see the problem. Test prep can be done on multiple levels. Last year, our school in Bridgeport, our upper school in Bridgeport, had the highest growth in the entire state, period. We went from the school with the lowest because we started it with the kids who they sent us, and then we grew the most in a year. Now, we prepped them for tests. I ain't going to sit there and tell you no lie, because we have to, because a football field is 100 yards, and until such time as it's not 100 yards, we're going to play by the rules of a 100-yard field. But the plays that we run or the things that we do in the classroom have to be driven by our own creativity. Our kids dig when we're creative. They do. We had an art teacher years ago who used to have the students write books about artists. And so what you'd see were a lot of collages, because some of the kids were not comfortable. Their handwriting wasn't, you understand what I'm saying, strong enough to depict the story that they wanted. So some would look like ransom letters, I'll give you that. But the point is that they were able to pull some art out of it and create and take art into a much bigger space. And so for them, some of the art that would otherwise be seen as visual became poetry. And so the paintbrush that they use were their words. And we'd be surprised how many of them don't see art beyond the physical painting, drawing thing. That art, as you well know, is the whole of it. I mean, you have this beautiful necklace, and I'm sure that a very creative person made that, and on and on and on. And my suggestion also is to continue to pull them into a space, find out what your students gets them really excited. What I've seen some fantastic art teachers in particular do is to really push the envelope and to push art into sometimes the technical places, right? Show the artistry of mechanization. What does it look like to see? You know, one of the reasons why they talk about Steve Jobs is because he went to, art school initially, and that was what separated his product from everyone else. He wasn't the first person to do his thing. He just made it look better. So sometimes it's connecting them to something that they already know. And then when you connect them to what they already know, I believe the best teachers convince people that they're teaching that they don't actually need to be taught, that they already know the answer. If you think about it yourself, in some schools where kids make fun of other kids, and I don't know if that's your school, but in some schools where kids make fun of other kids, art is a very difficult place to be, because it's like you can see it, either it looks like an apple or it doesn't. Like, that ain't no apple, shut up. And then it goes on from there. So create a safe space where kids know that what they're creating is so freaking awesome. Not the kind of millennial awesome, like it's not really awesome, but they're walking around thinking that they're awesome, not that awesome. But it's awesome, like it's gonna be awesome if you keep trying. Does that help? Okay. Yes, sir. It's a fantastic. Yeah, that is a great. He said that sometimes we overlook the people who we're trying to help, like our clients or guests or students or whatever your population is called. So I've seen that actually quite a bit. I think we all have. It's real easy if you're a social worker to sit on the other side of the desk and, fix people's lives. Like, poof, you're healed. Stop doing drugs. Fix your marriage. Take care of your kids. Get a job. Like, boom, boom, like, right? You just do it. Like, and then who's next? Right? While you go home to your little raggedy life, jacked up relationship, still trying to figure out your own sexuality while you're talking to kid through his. What I think is one of the most important skills that anyone could bring to our profession is humility. It's all too easy to start to look at our clients as if they are somehow so inherently different than we are. Excuse me, just because somebody's poor, just because somebody's indigent, just because somebody's bad off, just because somebody is in a hospital bed, that doesn't mean that they are without wisdom. If you do this job right, then the people who teach you the most are the people you're supposed to be working with. Your population should inspire you. One of our secret weapons also is there are people who, it's a strange system that we have. So in our schools, you can't have felons working in the schools. So I get it, right? I get it. It's kind of hard to tell somebody that their third grade teacher is, was a convicted felon for whatever the felony was. But if he was 18 when he did it, or if he's already been to prison and he did his, so now what do we do? You just throw him away? He can never be a professional? So we're done with this guy? It just doesn't seem right to me. And so we've found ways, I say, in a public space, we've found ways to work with people who other people say that we should not have in our classrooms. And I can tell you that if you go to many of your youth football leagues, any of your youth basketball leagues, your AAU, sometimes your churches, your mosques, synagogues, a lot of those cats who you see who are the most religious, the most committed, the ones who are doing the most work, people who did some time and who really, really, really appreciate their freedom. These are the same cats, they don't speed. You get in the car with them like, bro, are you really going to go 35 miles an hour? Yep. Like, you do know you can go a little faster than this. No, I can't. They won't take an aspirin. You've never seen them drink. You haven't heard them curse. But we can't have them around kids. When we're being honest, those of us who grew up a particular way, you know, your black ass was right where they were, and it could have been you too. Like, if we're going to be really, really, really honest, you were there too. Right there. You were in the car. You may have gotten out, but you were there. So, practically, there are some challenges to working with people in certain populations in certain settings. So I'm acknowledging that. But that just means we have to be more creative. And so, for instance, for us in Hartford, there were a group of brothers who had made some decisions in their lives, but they were involved in youth football, and a number of our kids were involved in youth football. And, you know, you can only call home so many times and not have the person pick up the phone, cuss you out for calling them, everything. You have the things that people who I know I've been helping have said and tried to do to me would make you vomit. It really, it never ceases to amaze me how I can pick your child up every single day, buy them food, put their uniform, build the school and everything. But the one day I don't do the one thing that you thought I was supposed to do, I am, everything that they can say, every word they can say. I'm finished. Do you know yesterday, I'm going to tell you, this is a true story. This is a true story. This happened to me yesterday. Every single kid who comes into school, I say, good morning, handsome. Good morning, beautiful. Whatever, you know, good morning, babe. Good morning, right? Just not because I don't know the name. It says the name on the sweater. I can read the name. But I just say something, because just say good morning to them. Just something kind in the morning. Yesterday I said, good morning, beautiful, to a little girl. Father was walking in and said, her name is such and such. I said, bruh, I'm just saying good morning to you, baby. It's not that deep. I say it to everybody. Watch, I'm going to say it to the little girl behind her. He said, I said her name is such and such. I said, my man, are you serious right now? Are you really serious right now? He said, I'm just trying to tell you her name. I said, you are making life way too complicated. Don't tell me nothing else. Don't even talk to me. And I walked away. We have to find a way to work with our community, even when our community won't work with us. So there was another parent. I said, good morning, beautiful. She said, oh, thank you for saying that to my daughter. And then we carried on. I don't want anyone in here to let a bad experience that you have with one of the people you're supposed to be serving make you think that that group can't be part of your group, can't be part of your solution, can't be part of your team. That brother, he got his own stuff. Maybe he'll come back one day and grow up and apologize. If he doesn't, 2 tears in the bucket. I'm still call him beautiful, and he can be mad about it. Yes. Yep, last question. Right here. Yes, ma'am. I am a social worker, and I work at a charter school in New Jersey. There you go. If you get close. It should be a little.
Hello? Okay. So I said I'm a social worker and I work at a charter school, an elementary charter school in Camden, New Jersey. And charter schools are very rigid about education. That is the number one priority. So as a social worker, like you said, we are trained to think differently. It is sometimes a struggle and a balance to be the social worker in a world where education is the number one priority, where these kids aren't on grade level, don't own books, can barely read. And I'm worried about, did they eat last night? Like, are they safe? And so I just want to know if you have the similar experience. Maybe it might be a little bit different, but if you relate to what I'm asking.
I do relate to what you're saying. That's why I started my own school.
I'm not doing that.
Okay. And that's important. No. That's really important. There are a lot of people who think that they could do something like start their own organization, and really you shouldn't. Like, it's not for you. Doesn't mean you can't be a vital player on a team. It just means that won't be your position. That's real right there. And I really respect you saying that. So I know that the most successful schools, these are the elite private schools, actually run more like social service agencies than we typically give them credit. Every single elite private school has an advisory system. Right? They have an advisory system, and they reach out to you at least as often. I mean, that's your person, not a social worker, but really close, right? They're the person who, and this notion that you can have a binary conversation about education and social work is bizarre. They don't exist opposite one another. On the same token, one of the problems is there are those who use their social challenges as an excuse. Say that the reason why this kid can't learn is because they're hungry. Well, if they're a kid, they're hungry. I have 2 sons. That's what they do. They eat. That's all they do is eat. Like, I bet you call the house right now, somebody's eating. It doesn't mean that we don't consider their issues, right? It doesn't mean that we don't consider the issues. It just means that we have to take the issues in consideration and work. This is where we as social workers, I really love being a social worker. What we have to do is we have to help other people come closer to social work. It's not their problem that they made the wrong decision, didn't become social workers. We don't hold that against them. We're social workers. It ain't that deep. We get it. They're nice people despite the fact they're not social workers, right? Not their fault. We still love them. We invite them over to the house. Some of y'all will marry them. It happens. It's all right. Some of them might earn enough money to make sure you get to stay a social worker. So that's all right. Work this stuff out. That being said, though, in all sincerity, we have to work with the other members of our team to get them to the space that they need to be in. We have to get them to think more like social workers. We have to. We have to get them to a space where they can teach, because you can't teach a kid who's not connected to you. He doesn't want to learn from you. He doesn't think you like him. He doesn't think you love him. You have to love him. One of the reasons why you'll see a great social worker, she or he will have a line outside the office. I mean, they're like the Pied Piper. As soon as they walk out, the kid's like, "Phew, Miss, can I talk to you?" It's because they think you love them. They don't understand, like you do, but they don't understand that that's what we're trained to do. We're trained to be empathetic. We're trained to engage them in their heart. So yes, that is my experience. I will tell you, when I was at Mansion, it was a tough ride. I'm sure it's very different now. I'm sure it's an amazing school and everybody's doing well. I can't talk about somewhere I haven't been in 20 years, so, I can see it now. Somebody on social media, hey, I ain't in now. Whatever. Do your kids go there? No. So then it must not be that damn good. If somebody pays you to be there and you still won't bring your kids there, I digress. So when I was there, it was really tough. And that was where, I decided I need to be in a different space. It wasn't about Mansion or not. It was just about being in a space where I could make changes in the environment. Because while I was there, the things I saw kids go through and the way I heard grown people talk about kids, I thought, man, that kid hurt your feelings like that? I mean, you a grown person. He is 14. You cannot be hurt by a 14-year-old. It's not possible. He's only 14. What could he say to you that made you so... For you to come in this teacher's lounge talking like that about this little boy, man, you need to go home. one of the main reasons why, as I close, one of the main reasons why our big urban schools fail absolutely is because kids are convinced that they don't belong to anybody, that nobody cares about them. And if you ask them, they will say explicitly that. And they will say people's names and you'll be like, she really doesn't care. Okay? The kids know. They don't have wisdom, but they have instinct. And the kids know every single person in the school who is a jerk. They know everybody who's messing with somebody. They know everybody who's bad to kids. They know everybody who's about their life, who will be there for them no matter what. They all do. Every single one does. And it's like they tell the kids as soon as they come in, watch out for her, watch out for her. Like the kid could be in school for 10 minutes. Hey, I heard Miss such and such, she's mean. So I say to you and all the other people who are working, I'm specifically talking about schools now, when you're in a school, you have to find a way to throw your arm around some of your colleagues who are teachers and say to them, hey man, how can I help you? Like, what can I do? I see you having trouble with Raekwon. I've had him in my office. Can I just talk to you about a couple things that I've seen with him? Here's another way. If you give him this thing, he will do this thing. And if you and I work together, what we can do is, if you do this, I'll give him some time here. We'll work something out. Put your ego aside. We got to get this kid right. If he sees your ego, he's going to react with his little ego. Things are going to go miserably wrong. Let them know that you're coming in to make their job easier. You're not giving them more work. Their job is hard enough. You're not doing that. You're saying, look, I'm coming in. I got you. One of the things that one of the things that we do with our social workers is, first of all, we over-social work our schools. Shocker. I hire more social workers in our schools typically than you would see for a population.
Yes.
And it is a bias. I'm not fronting like, well, it's not a bias. No, it really is a bias. I do it on purpose. And what we do is we deploy our social workers into the classrooms before the kids come out. We expect you to go into the classrooms, and I want you to look. You see a kid whose head is drifting. You see kids who's got certain behaviors that just, you think, that doesn't look like he's paying attention. I want you on that. And when you come back and y'all have your meeting, I want you to tell each other, like, hey, did you see Raekwon? Because yesterday he was all upbeat. Today he was real flat. And I want you to be able to see him across multiple classes. I want you to see that he's doing what where actually wasn't. It was just when he was with Miss B, they don't get along. Okay, that's because the rest of the day he was fine. And then you look and you go down to the office, and how many times he been sent out of Miss B's class? You're like, oh, here we go. You got to be the advocate. You got to be the advocate. You got to run in there and do something, because you can't really just bail on her entirely, right? You can't really just snitch on her, but you got to do something. Because this kid is getting the wrong end of an education that he doesn't deserve. So there are ways, my point is that you got to get in there. I'm saying this presumptuously. You ask me, I'm saying this presumptuously. You got to get in there and help the faculty members and the students. You have to be the go-between. Don't just sit up in your offices. That's bad. That's bad. You should only be in your office when you're doing paperwork, which you should be doing at the end of the day, and when you're with a client. The rest of the time, if you're in a school, especially if you're in my school, if I come by and you in the office and there ain't a child in there, you better be writing your little behind off, like typing like nobody's business, and I will get you a laptop, but you better not be in the office. Because there are no kids in the office. Why are you there? I mean, what do you need to be there for? Get out. Go out. Go see the kids. See them in their environment. Go to their football practice. See them at football practice. Recognize, wait a minute, this kid who everybody says is an idiot, I just watched him in football practice. He is not an idiot. He is not an idiot at all. In fact, he's a quarterback, and he knows quite a bit. He's a bright kid. But everybody here talks to him like he's a dog. So I'm looking at the coach. The coach throws his arm around his shoulder. So you take that information back to the classroom, say, hey, you know what I saw? I went to such and such a youth football practice. It was by my house. So I just drove by on the way home. I went and saw his practice. And you know what? This boy's a leader. Usually those kids are the leaders. But we don't see it because we see them in these inauthentic settings. We see them after somebody who doesn't understand them sent them to us. Now we're sitting in the office, just the two of us. Their arms are folded. They can't stand you. You can't stand them half. And then you think, well, something's definitely wrong with this kid. And there really isn't. It's just a bunch of bad things happen on the way to our office. If you had been out in the hall, you'd seen him at lunch, you say, okay, he's got a whole bunch of friends. His brother said he's bullied all the time. He's not bullied. Matter of fact, he could chill a little bit because he might be the bully. You get to see the rest of the child. So, one, work with our colleagues to make sure that they think more like social workers. That's real. 2, work with them specifically with children. Get into their classroom, see them. Tell them, I'm not observing you. I am not here to observe you. I'm looking at the kids. I'm just here looking at the kids. I got some of my kids in your class. Relax. I'm not here to watch you. And then when you can build the rapport with them and you can say what you need to say to them, those who you can show that you can add value to, then the last part, for me, the last part is you've seen the kids in other environments. You've been out in there. Now you're an authority. You have data. You say, well, in this class he does it this way because she does this. In this class he does it this way because she does that. Maybe if we both do this, or if you go in those cases where you can, you saw that this we call it teachers illuminators, sorry, that this teacher has done something, some reward system that works with this kid, carry it to the next class. You can do that. You can do that. You know that his football coach or his Cub Scout leader does things a particular way because you've talked to him about that. Tell the teacher, look, I'm just telling you, when he starts, you tell him stop, and you don't get caught up and start hollering at him, you back and forth with a 9-year-old, you just tell him cut it out, he'll actually cut it out. When you have these things that can help them, then they will think like the first thing I just said is think like a social worker. Folks, I gotta go. I know, right? I know. They're telling me, right? They're telling me I gotta go. I know it's not my fault. It's your school. Thank you so much for your time.